The light hello situation is insane. Welcome back everybody, I'm Fuggle, and there has been a lot of discussion on the upcoming 1.5 anniversary banner with Agnes Tachyon and light hello, so I want to weigh in there with my 2 cents, give my opinion on that matter. Should you pull or not? What limit break is acceptable? All of those works. Of course, the first card on this list is the Agnes Tachyon speed card. I've heard a lot of conflicting opinions about this card. It's a must pull, or it's useless after Grand Live, or it's still amazing after Grand Live. And I think all of those sides do make very solid arguments, but to understand if you should pull or not, we first need to discuss what her strengths are, and how she stacks up to the other SSR speed cards. And I'll put the stats and some comparisons on screen for you guys, but that isn't really what I mean when I say strengths. Knowing that she gives 1 or 2 more or less of a stats compared to another speed card isn't really what we're looking for. What I mean by strength is what her role is compared to other cards. When I think about speed cards, in my head I kind of have a tier list for them. Tier 1 speed cards would be just Kita for now, which would be great stat sticks with a versatile gold skill. Curvature is basically useful on every Uma in every situation. Tier 2 are strong speed sticks with more niche golds. Think Mayano, Taiki, Twin Turbo, Maruzensky. They're very good in certain situations, but outside of those situations, they're just bare stats. Tier 3 would just be pure stat sticks with useless golds, and we could go on, but what matters is that Tachyon would be a Tier 2 speed card. She outputs strong stats, and has a good gold skill, but it is more conditional. It's only useful in more niche scenarios, basically for pace chasers. With that being said, we can skip a lot of that discussion if you just lack 2 SSR speed cards. If that's the case, then she's already an automatically amazing pull. There's no lower limit break or free SSR that will compare to Tachyon. She's also still going to be the go-to speed cards for pace chasers for a while. So if you plan on running pace chasers often, let's say you have an Oshi that's a pace chaser or use a lot of Christmas Ogre, she will still be very, very useful. But in the case that you already do have 2 good SSRs, the value and longevity she has goes way down, and in that case I'd consider borrowing her instead of pulling, unless you are a pace main or just have extra carrots to spend on this banner. And since a lot of you are probably wondering, yes, she is a lot stronger than 1 limit break Maruzensky, although obviously for runners you'll still use Maru. If you go max on Maru though, things get a lot closer, and it may not be worth it to pull on this card. But all the things I've mentioned about her role so far don't really apply to Grand Life specifically. So no, Tachyon does not become useless after Grand Live, far from it. She goes from almost as good as Kita to being really on par with those Tier 2 speed cards after Grand Live ends. So what does she get in Grand Live to make her amazing there specifically? Well, this is the reason people say she's usable in this scenario at 1 limit break. Although she loses a lot of the stats that make her great and become just a mid speed card in general, she does give you some extra tokens in her event chain from the scenario link, and allow you to pick an extra gold skill at the end. For the tokens, I guess it's nice. If I remember correctly, it's like 20 per event, which is good but also not really run changing most of the time. It isn't a must-use card just for this. The gold skill she gives is also pretty decent. It's a medium exclusive gold skill called Come With Me. It is a final straight velocity skill, which is pretty solid. Late race velocity is nice to counteract Dominator, but it does have the requirements of being 2nd to 5th place, not 1st. This may sound like a big issue, but in practice it isn't really as bad as long as you aren't a frontrunner. Pace chasers have a little trouble using it since they might be 1st by the time it wants to pop, but again it lets you beat those Christmas Ogres who are just ahead of you, which is still pretty good value. But it is most consistent on lates and ends because you're usually not 1st by the start of the final straight anyway, and even if you are, you probably already won by then. Again, not the most impressive or cost-efficient skill, but we'll probably end up buying it with our extra skill points. 1 limit break has a niche of still being great in the medium CMs and particularly on pace chasers, so mainly just Christmas Ogre, but outside of that, she's outclassed by every SSR and a few SRs too. So my take on whether or not you should pull on this card is unfortunately just pretty lukewarm. It depends on your situation. I want you all to look at your deck and ask yourself how much you will be using this card and how much is actually changing your runs. If you don't have any speed SSRs, you will definitely be using this card all the time in your decks for a long while, so you definitely do want to pull for her. If you already have one or more, you should be thinking about how much of an impact that will be having per run, and if it's worth the carrots. Maybe you love Pace Chasers and this will be an amazing card. Maybe you rarely run Pace Chasers and it'll barely be an improvement over your other speed cards. Maybe you have a borrow slot open for when you need it, so maybe you don't need to pull it. And you don't even have to decide right now, you can do your pulls on Light Hello first and see how many copies you get and go from there. This is a banner here to fix accounts, and I don't just like people saying that it's a must pull or it's a bait banner, but it really depends on your deck and your carrot situation, and your UMA preference. But what I can say with some certainty is that you shouldn't be pulling on this with the intention of getting one limit break. A card that only works for one scenario and is only good on a few UMAs and tracks during that scenario is a big waste of carrots. The only reason you're using one limit break is if you do pulls on Light Hello and naturally get a couple copies. And on that note, you can use 0 limit break too, the 1 speed bonus isn't going to be the end of the world. Speaking of Light Hello, let's move on to the other card in the banner. She'll also only be good for one scenario, but unlike 1 limit break Tachyon, you're going to want to use her in pretty much every deck. Obviously, the main consensus is that you have to use this card, but it is the details of the limit break that people argue about the most. First, I want to talk about the R version compared to the SSR and why it is not the same case as Rico. So stat-wise, just like Rico, max limit break on the R version is almost identical to the SSR at 1 limit break. There is a difference though, and that is the unique effect of the SSR providing 30% energy cost reduction when she shows up to a rainbow training, which is pretty big. I'd go even so far as to say that this alone makes 0 limit break SSR better than MLB on the R version, because the 5 training effectiveness is likely to get you a bit of extra stats, maybe 60 more, while the energy reduction can sometimes give you multiple more speed clicks per run, which will end up being way more than 60 stats. It can just drastically change a run's direction by allowing you to click a really good speed training because you saved that energy. Of course, if that were all, it still wouldn't be that much of a difference, but unlike Rico, Light Hello actually has a good gold skill. See You Later is the gold version of Playtime's Over, which is just an insanely good skill for every running style. It's just Curvature 2.0 essentially. Yes, every running style, even end closer. If your end is in 9th place the whole race, they're probably going to lose. End closers need to push up mid-race, it is why Daring Strike is so good. And again, having the gold version alone isn't enough for me to say that you really want the SSR over the R, but that plus the energy reduction together is a pretty good argument. And also, another thing is, how in the world are you maxing out the R card without getting the SSR? Are you just pulling on a later banner, getting lucky with the R rolls? I don't know, it just seems pretty unreasonable to use the R card unless you're somehow both really poor on carrots and get really lucky with getting that from the free pulls. But let's say you do pull on the SSR, then how many copies do you want? Well, quite simply, it's just as many you could get in 200 pulls. On average, that's going to be 1 limit break. After the first copy, limit break 1 and 2 are going to both be giving you 5 training effectiveness each, which is pretty nice to have, but after that the card gains little else of value. Personally, 5 training effectiveness per limit break also isn't worth it to use a crystal on either. 5 TE on a single scenario is a huge waste of resources. I also wouldn't pull more if you get 1 limit break in your first 200, unless you also want Tachyon. But if you do get really unlucky in 200 and only get 1 copy, it might be worth it to do 200 more just for 2 more limit breaks, so that would be 10 training effectiveness. Now, I wouldn't do that. I need to save my carrots, but if you have carrots to spend, it isn't a terrible idea. Again, my thoughts on Light Hello are pretty simple, just do 200 and try to get as many copies as you can. If you get unlucky, you get unlucky. So that's just my thoughts on the banner overall. I know there's some mixed messaging concerning this banner, so I just wanted to clear it up with my opinion, which is of course objectively better and more nuanced than everyone else's opinions. And thank you guys so much for 500 subs too. Back when I was just making draft content for my friends, I never would have imagined I'd be getting thousands of views per video. And it's just really awesome and fun. But anyways, that's going to be it for now, and see you later.